Hey everybody, and welcome to episode 50 of the Alec MMA show. And I'm going to try to make this episode relatively quick. It's like 10 after 10 right now. I'm running on mountain time, so the NFL game's starting like 45 minutes or so. And I'm an Eagles fan, so I'm going to watch them try to avoid going 0-3 against the Bengals. But I got to be honest, it ain't looking fucking good. Anyway, in this episode, we're just going to be recapping UFC 253 from last night, right? And the prelims kick off when Danilo Marquez defeats Kadis Ibragimov via unanimous decision. Ibragimov kind of had some moments, like towards the end, where he had a guillotine attempt and some moments where he was able to find some success, but for the most part, the match was dominated by Marquez's grappling. Juan Espino was able to pick up a first-round arm triangle victory over Jeff Hughes. That was an impressive win. Good submission for him. Get the guy out of there quickly, right? Does a lot of good things for your name. And then we move over to like the main prelims. Those were the early prelims, and we jump over to the main prelim card, and it kicks off with William Knight versus Alexa Kamore. And guys, William Knight he's built like a brick shit house, but he's one of those guys who a lot of the times when you get to the UFC level, that strength and a lot of the things, that power, you could rely on that early on in your region, in the regional scene and maybe some lower level professional organizations, but once you get to the UFC level, you kind of see that negated, right? Like guys will beat that with technique, but William Knight, and I'm not saying that William Knight doesn't have good technique. He's a good grappler and he's a good martial artist. I think there are things that he needs to refine, but he is just so overwhelmingly powerful that it does translate to the UFC level, right? Like you'll get this guy into positions where you think you're going to have some sort of advantage over him or maybe be able to hold him there for a little bit. There was a point in the fight where Alexa Kamore had William Knight's back and Knight just spun right into his guard. And I mean, don't get me wrong, people do that, but it's just the sheer power that the man possesses. And when you couple that with solid technique, like I said, he's still refining it, but William Knight still has solid technique. When you couple those two things, that power and that technique, man, it's a dangerous combination. And when he got a hold of that Kamora at the end of the second round, I think it was, I thought he was going to fucking tear Alexa Kamore's arm off. He is so strong. And like I said, just keep working on the small things. And I think William Knight might be a problem for some guys at 205. So big win for him over a guy who's also, I think they're kind of both on the same level in the sense that they were both considered these up-and-coming prospects for the light heavyweight division. The next guy that we're going to talk about, guys, and if I'm butchering names at any point, please correct me in the comments. Ludovic Klein defeats Shane Young in the first round. The whole thing kind of stems off with a massive head kick, and then he follows it up with a barrage of punches. And I think he's so precise, guys. I'm pretty sure this guy has a pretty strong and extensive boxing background, and you just got to see, I mean, he set the head kick up with the hands first. He throws it. He works his right hand really fucking well. And he got the guy moving into his left kick, right? And then he landed it and then followed it up and got the finish. But it was an impressive win. And I believe he's the first Slovakian to ever win a fight in the UFC. So a big deal for him, a big deal for his country. And I think there are going to be some exciting things for this guy moving down the road. You just got to see that, like, when they talk about levels to the game, I mean, this got put on display twice with the Adesanya fight and this one. But when they talk about levels, man, you could just tell that there was like a precision, something to his timing, something to his movements, how crisp they were. He was just on a different level than Shane Young, and he really put on a beautiful display last night. And like I said, I'm really excited to see what the future holds for this kid. Jake Matthews picks up a win over Diego Sanchez in the next fight. It was dominant. After you watch that, guys, if you were ever on board for Conor McGregor fighting Diego Sanchez, I don't know how you still can be after last night. I never was in the first place, but guys, it does not make sense. Like Conor is elite, like still top of the food chain at 155. When you look at Diego on the feet, I see a guy who's just getting older, man. And I love Diego Sanchez. First season of The Ultimate Fighter, he's given us some of the best moments in UFC history. That first round against Clay Guida is maybe the craziest round ever. I love Diego, but you have to face reality here, right? He's not going to be able to hang with Conor McGregor. It's an easy fight for Conor. One where Conor, like, I don't know, I can't see Dana White making that fight happen. It's a massive mismatch, guys. It's not a fun fight. And if you look at like last night at Diego when he's on the feet, the reaction time's not there. His movement slowed down a little bit. He's got a little bit of a belly now. And again, I'm not hating on the guy. It's just age. It takes a hold of everyone. And you get Conor trying to defend. I think he's beefing with Dana. I don't know what exactly is going on. It's hard to follow, right? Seems like drama's always following Conor somewhere. But he's like, you got to respect what Diego's done. And yes, you do. But Jake Matthews just handled him with relative ease. Like, if you're Conor, you got to be fighting. I'm not buying that pay-per-view. I'm not even interested in that if they give it to me for free on a main card on ESPN. That fight is not interesting, man. Move on. Like, why even? And maybe your counter to that is, well, Conor's going to fight an older boxer in Manny Pacquiao. Like, what's the difference? Well, the difference is that Conor gets to utilize his full skill set in an MMA fight. And if he does that against Diego Sanchez, he's going to overwhelm him. When you step into a boxing ring, I think people think that like maybe the age, and they kind of thought this with Mayweather too, right? And Mayweather just took him to school. I was one of the MMA fans who wanted to believe Conor could pull it off. But when he got in there against Floyd, the mismatch was obvious, right? But with Manny Pacquiao, you're thinking again, and I think Conor's still going to be the underdog going into the Pacquiao fight if they actually do box. But the difference is that Conor's young, he's in his prime, and Pacquiao, even though he's getting older, it's still a boxing match, and that's what Pacquiao's entire career was based around, right? So I would think that the advantage in a fight like that still goes to Pacquiao. There's just so much nuance that, like, and we're going to get back to the card, don't worry, I promise. I'm just going to touch on this briefly, but when Conor McGregor fought Mayweather, I was just thinking about the precision and accuracy, right? And not all the nuances of boxing and how you have to carry yourself and the fatigue that sets in and just like, in a world where Conor boxes Floyd Mayweather 10 times, he probably loses 10 times. I don't know if the story is going to be any different against Manny Pacquiao, but I'll tell you what, I'm much more interested in a boxing match between Manny Pacquiao and Conor McGregor than I am an MMA fight between Conor McGregor and Diego Sanchez. That's all I'll say on the matter, and we can move on. The next fight was the headlining fight of the prelim card, Brad Riddell versus Alec Silva, and I thought both guys put on a show in this one, man. I thought it was a good fight. I thought it was one of the better fights of the night. Brad Riddell really came on strong in that third round. It was just a great matchup, guys, and Brad Riddell was able to pick up a unanimous decision win and a big win and kind of got you warmed up for the main card coming up, right? So we move on to Hakeem Dawodu versus Zubaira Tukhugov. Tukhugov missed weight by like 4.5 pounds. So they end up having a catch weight bout at 150 instead of the featherweight limit of 145. 146 if you're being technical, right? You get a pound or whatever. Anyway, first round I think belongs to Tukhugov. Second round, I think it went to Dawodu still. I know Tukhugov landed that late takedown, but he didn't really do a whole lot with it. And I really liked... This is the problem with scoring, right? Like, I think Dawodu still, even by the current standards of scoring, won the fight. But Dawodu clearly won the third round by the largest margin, right? Like, Dawodu won the third round by a larger margin than Tukhugov won the first round, by example. And then the second was close. In my mind, just like looking at the fight as a whole, if you consider how Tukhugov, and this is why people think there should be more emphasis on late rounds. If that fight goes and I know it doesn't, but if the fight goes 4 or 5 rounds, I think Dawodu is going to get a finish. He was taking over. It was a dominant round. He was really picking Tukhugov apart, fending off the takedowns. And I really like the game plan from Hakeem Dawodu because Tukhugov is one of those guys who uses a lot of... This is why Tuhgugov's a dangerous guy to fight. A lot of mobility, risk taker, has an underrated left hand. He works his lead hand really well, and he's got a really sneaky left hook as he goes off the center line that'll catch you with, right? He's also a great wrestler. He's not afraid to mix that in. He's not like I know he trains AKA, he's not like a Habib level guy, but he'll mix it in. He's a well-rounded martial artist, and that mobility and stuff can be hard to deal with, but Dawodu just stayed patient, and even though he lost the first round in my eyes, stuck to the game plan, chopped at the legs, mixed things up, and didn't ever get into these wild brawls with Tuhugov, because a lot of the times what you'll see is he'll blitz in and he'll hit you. Like, he's got solid boxing and stuff. Like I said, Tuhugov, very well-rounded martial artist. He'll go in and hit you with stuff, and then you'll get into these kind of exchanges with him where you overcommit your hips, and then he'll switch levels and hit the takedown. And that's where he kind of like starts mixing things up, and then that'll open up his striking when you get back up. Dawodu did a good job of never letting him really get ahead like that. He never really dug himself into a hole. He stayed behind his game plan. Like I said, picked the legs apart, stayed in his stance, stayed fundamentally sound. And by the time the third round came around, he was in control of the fight. And I thought it was a very impressive performance from Hakeem Dawodu against a really tough contender in Tuhugov. So big win for him. I felt like Dawodu won the fight, but again, I think rounds 1 and 2 were close. Second was probably the closest round of the fight. But the third clearly belonged to Dawodu, and it just felt like because of that round and because of Tuhugov's lack of willingness to engage at the end of that third round, it just felt like Dawodu won the fight as a whole, if that makes sense. Next, we move on to Catelyn Vieira and Sajar Eubanks. This was actually a pretty interesting fight, guys. I think the first round was close, and I think that takedown that Vieira landed was kind of the difference maker on the scorecards. I think it got her that first round. If I remember, I'd have to rewatch the fights. But I think that I think throughout the duration of the fight, they got into some really interesting back and forth on the feet. I think Sajar, if I remember correctly, kind of controlled the third round on the feet mainly. But I think Catelyn was able to mix some takedowns and stuff and throughout the second too, and that probably stole her that round. So I think if I'm remembering correctly, guys, and again, I'd have to rewatch the fights to be sure, I think Catelyn won the first and second narrowly, and then Sajar probably won the third. But regardless, it was a unanimous decision win for Catelyn Vieira, and a big win for her, and kind of one where you guys got to remember too, like taking Sajar Eubanks down is a big deal. She's a jiu-jitsu world champion. I know that doesn't always attest to like your takedown defense, but when you can put them there, like I know that my point. Sorry, I know that being a jiu-jitsu artist doesn't always mean that you have great takedown defense, because usually like that's the part where jiu-jitsu artists struggle is with takedowns and defending the takedowns, right? At times, but a lot of the times they can get away with not having to defend the takedowns because guys don't want to go to the ground with a jiu-jitsu person, right? So really, it's their offensive takedowns. Anyway, I'm getting sidetracked. I got to stop. Regardless, an impressive performance from Catelyn Vieira. Next, we move on to, I don't know if this was fight of the night. Fight of the night might have been Riddell versus De Silva, in my opinion. But the first round of Brandon Royval versus Kai Kara France was fucking insanity. They got into some crazy grappling transitions. Kai Kara France drops him with a right hook, and then Royval bounces back up, and you're like, all right, he might be okay. And then he falls down on one knee, and you're like, oh no, he's still hurt. And then as Kara France is coming in, Royval hits a spinning elbow on Kara France, rocks him. Now they're on the ground. Now Royval's trying go-go platas, and I gotta say, guys, I know, like, Royval just tapped out Tim Elliott in his last fight. And Tim Elliott's one of those guys who's got a pretty slick submission game, right? He's got some nice setups. Granted, one thing you have to consider when you're talking about Tim Elliott is even though he implements his jiu-jitsu effectively offensively, he has been submitted like 5 or 6 times in his career, right? I mean, granted, it's been the likes of like Joseph Benavidez and Davis and Figueiredo, right? But you still don't tap the man out easily. So I think Royval's submission skills really were, to me, this fight was about Kai Kara France's ability to keep it on the feet and control the distance and range and everything, and Royval's ability to get it to the ground and engage in these grappling situations, right? Well, you kind of got to see that Kai Kara France fought a good fight, but Brandon Royval just put it on him in every department, not just the grappling. I mean, he was putting it on him in the striking realm too. I'm going to do a breakdown, I think, of the submission, but I actually think that Kai Kara France was going for a takedown when Royval locked up the guillotine and finished him in the second. So, I mean, it was an impressive performance from Royval, and one of those guys who, man, can you believe that they were ever thinking about getting rid of the flyweight division after watching a kid like that? He was so aggressive. Everything was so crisp. He was landing things. He was accurate. He has all these fucking crazy grappling transitions that he gets into. And it was just, I know he got tagged and stuff, but I thought he kind of just dominated the fight as a whole. It was a great performance from him. And another kid who is just giving you reason to get excited about 125 pounds right now. You got Garbrandt fighting Figueiredo for the title. You got all these fucking contenders coming up through it. It's a fun weight class to watch right now. And I like watching little guys because the margin for error isn't quite as small in terms of like you're going to get knocked out. But if your technique is lacking in any way, it's going to get exposed, right? Because their movements are so quick. So if you're just a little bit behind, or your techniques aren't quite as crisp as the other person's, it's going to get exposed. And I thought that Royval kind of showed that, and showed that he's not just a submission artist. I mean, I just think that a lot of people thought Kai Kara-France was going to have an advantage on the feet. I myself did, and I think Royval kind of did a lot to shut those people up. So I'm eating a little bit of crow right now too, because I really thought that city kickboxing background and everything, and thinking about it now, I just think that Royval didn't respect it in a good way. Like, he just kind of like, he was like, all right, I'm going to fight you. Like, I'm not going to get into these range battles where you're getting your timing down and setting me up with footwork and getting in and out. Fuck you. I'm just going to fight you. Because he's not afraid to end up in these grappling transitions. He won most of them. And I thought he did a great job of taking the fight to Kai Kara-France, and just a big victory for him overall. All right, so now we get around to the co-main event between Yomblahowitz and Dominic Reyes for the light heavyweight title. John Jones obviously vacated it, moved up to heavyweight, and now you've got Dominic Reyes, who last fought John Jones, lost. A lot of people thought he won. I don't know. It was close, and usually in situations like that, the decision's going to go to the champion. But I thought Dominic Reyes fought a good fight against John Jones. And Yomblahowitz has been on a tear lately, right? His last loss, I believe, was to Thiago Santos, but he's knocked out Luke Rockhold, knocked out Corey Anderson. And he goes into this fight, and he just looked so calm and so poised, and he looked like a veteran in there. And a guy who is, the thing about Yomblahowitz isn't just, I know he's been knocking people out lately, but if you look throughout his career, guys, he's a black belt, and he'll pull off these really crafty submissions. I couldn't be more impressed with Yomblahowitz last night. I thought he was mixing the kicks into the body well. You saw he bruised, I think it was this side of Dominic Reyes' ribs all up. And I kept noticing this. I was waiting for Dominic Reyes to get more offensive at some point and start pushing the pace a little bit more. But every time he tried to, guys, Jan was beating him to the punch in the boxing exchanges, and that's what eventually ended the fight. I think that as the fight picked up and they got into this kind of, things started really getting going, Jan was just more technical and more efficient in the boxing, right? And he was landing before he ended up knocking Dominic Reyes out, right? He picked the win up in the second round towards the end of the second round. But I just thought that there were not a lot of moments of success for Dominic Reyes. Like a few things that he did right, but a couple leg kicks that he landed. But for the most part, I thought Jan was in control of the fight. And like I said, making Dominic pay for any type of pressure that he did put on him. He just looked cleaner in the boxing. He looked a little bit cleaner everywhere, guys, and he picked up another knockout win. He's showing you that he's a dual threat now, too, because now he's proving to you that he has the knockout power. And not just only over guys who are, like Luke Rockhold moving up from 185. Like, he's done it to Anderson and Dominic Reyes now. I think he looks great. I'm really happy for Yomblahowitz. I think he's one of the good guys in the sport, and a guy who's been working a long time to earn this. And he's also somebody who, when I watch him fight, he gets progressively better even though he is a veteran. Like, he looked great last night. And you always got to be worried about, again, if you do get into grappling situations with him, he's big and strong and he's a black belt and he can tap you out from places that you don't really expect him to. So there's a lot to be excited about if you're Yomblahowitz. And you got to wonder what's next for him, because light heavyweight is kind of lacking a lot of depth right now. And John Jones is obviously teasing coming back down and fighting Jan. If I'm John, I know the fights at heavyweight are exciting. I'm seriously considering going to fight Jan. He's been knocking people out, and it would just be like, if he can beat Jan, that's truly the last person that he has to beat in the weight class before he can officially move on. I don't think that John has to go fight Jan in order to prove his worth as a light heavyweight contender or like the light heavyweight GOAT. I think John's the greatest fighter of all time already. I don't think he has anything to prove at light heavyweight, But if he did want to move down there and just kind of take Jan on, I wouldn't be disappointed with it. Jan showing you that he's got knockout power, he can grapple. I think Jan wins the fight. But if you really want to cement yourself, you just got this newly crowned champion. If you want to prove that you are the ultimate, like he already has. I'm not saying that he hasn't, right? I'm not saying he has to do this, but I don't think it's a terrible fight. I think Yomblahowitz has given you something to kind of be excited about in the light heavyweight division. And also, if you consider how close Dominic Reyes' fight was with Jon Jones and the fact that Jan just finished Dominic, a little bit of a storyline there. And, I don't think it's a terrible matchup. I think Jon wins it if they fight, but it's kind of like the last guy that Jon kind of could knock out that's relevant at 205, right, before he moves up to heavyweight. So it's going to be interesting to see what happens there. And Jan wants to fight. He wants to – yes, they won the belt last night, but everybody thinks of 205 as Jon Jones' division still. There's still something – and I hate to say this because Yomblahowitz is the undisputed champ right now, right? Like Jon relinquished his belt, but there's just something about 205 that's going to feel like Jon Jones is for a long time. And maybe that fight, I don't know. I don't know, man. Like I said, I think Jon. Anyway, let's move on to the main event. I'm done rambling about it. Israel Adesanya takes on Paulo Costa. And this is a fight that everybody's excited about because it's kind of like brawn versus brain, people say, right? Like Israel Adesanya is the brains and Paulo Costa is one of those guys who's willing to walk through punishment in order to land things. A lot of people were disappointed in Costa's unwillingness to walk forward and throw punches and to throw bombs and to kind of put the offense on Adesanya. But guys, I think there's something that happens to you when you get into that cage. And don't forget, guys, Paulo Costa's good, but he fought Yoel Romero, the likes of like Johnny Hendricks, like Derek Brunson, I believe. These guys are not on the same level as Israel Adesanya in the striking department, and that's where Paulo Costa likes to keep it primarily, right? Like if you look at Yoel Romero is not the most technical striker in the world. He's just got this deadly, explosive power, and when he lands, it's devastating, and then he's got the wrestling to follow it up, right? So, like when Costa beats up on him, it's like, okay, it's especially going into the third round, and that was a close fight, but I think that Costa was picking up momentum in the third. I think that when you're fighting someone like Adesanya who's super precise, it's not the same thing as fighting a Yoel Romero where you can be a little bit reckless because you're going like power for power. Like you could kind of see when the fight got started that Costa wanted to push the fight up against the cage and kind of close off the space, but Adesanya was standing his ground. He didn't let himself get backed up very often. And you could see that Costa was kind of like hesitant about coming. I think that when you start standing in front of Adesanya and you can just see his movement and the way he deals with range, and you can feel that if you go in for things, you're going to get exposed. I think that's what started happening to Costa. And then Adesanya starts digging the leg kicks in. And when you rely on power and forward pressure and a guy's beating the fuck out of your lead leg, putting weight on it becomes hard. So now not only are you thinking, you're physically compromised. Like you're overthinking and physically compromised. The way that Costa wins this fight, this is the problem, and this is why I had a hard time picking Costa going into this fight, right? If you're Costa, the way that you kind of have to engage Adesanya is by closing off space and getting into almost not a brawl, but like you got to put pressure on him and throw a lot of strikes and volume, right? You can't give him time to start setting things up. The problem with that is when you get aggressive, you also risk being overly aggressive, right? So you're missing on things and you're overextending on things. And when you're doing that against an expert level striker who is great at managing distance, who is great at seeing things coming, who is great at, sliding out of the way of things and landing their own shots, that's a dangerous game plan. It's dangerous because you're going to get exposed, right? And then when Adesanya starts kicking the legs of Costa and you start limiting his mobility and that forward pressure, well, you've taken away who he is as a fighter. And when that's gone, now Adesanya's kind of free to start opening up a little more. And as long as he stays relatively safe, he can start avoiding danger and landing strikes of his own. And you saw as he started working on that leg of Costa more and more, the mobility kind of slowed down from Costa, and Adesanya was able to let off longer combinations and landing more successfully with them. And finally, in the second round, he just overwhelmed Costa. knocked him down, mounted him, hopped on top of him, and finished the fight. And it was an impressive performance against a guy who a lot of people thought might come in and steamroll Adesanya. But again, you just got to see the sophistication of Israel Adesanya, the last style bender striking, right? It's so advanced and it's so hard to deal with. And I really just think that when guys get in there and they're standing across from him, they think that they're going to be able to go in and be aggressive like that and kind of, impose their will on him because he's kind of skinny and long and little and you might be able to overpower him. But I think that once you're in there and the cage is locked and you're standing, like I said, you have to face him. You can just feel that he has a better grasp on the art of striking as a whole. And I think that you kind of got to see a little bit of hesitancy from Paulo Costa last night because of that. But it was a great win from Adesanya, and you got to think that the guy he's going to fight next is probably going to be the winner of Robert Whittaker and Jared Cannonier. That's a great fight, and it might not be a terrible idea to have Paulo Costa fight the loser of that bout. So, 185 has a lot going on right now, a lot of exciting fighters to be amped up about, and I think the direction of the division is trending positively. So, yeah, I think that's going to wrap this one up, guys. Like I said, I'm going to hop off here and watch the Eagles try to avoid going 0-3. I don't have the greatest feeling about it, but thank you, everybody, for tuning in. I think I'm at 394 subscribers, guys, so almost to 400, so thank you guys so much for all the support. If you tuned in, like the episode, have anything to add, throw it in the comments, hit the like button, hit the subscribe button for me, and I think that's going to wrap this one up. Enjoy your Sunday, and thank you again for tuning in. Bye-bye.